Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for showing up on a Saturday morning. I didn't actually expect this many people. It's great to see you all. What I'd like to do today is take you through progressive exposure using feature flags. So we had Heidi talking about feature flags yesterday. So there's going to be a bit of a repetition. And also deployment rings. And what I'd like to do is share two stories after I went through some of the basics or the overviews, and then just show you how we adopted these two things as part of Visual Studio. My name is Willy Schaub. You can reach me anytime, any place just send me an email on willys@microsoft.com, or you can also give me a shout on Twitter. As mentioned, I'm a program manager on the Visual Studio Team Services team, and also with the ALM DevOps Ranger community. So it's a part-time community working with the Visual Studio Team Services team. So if you're wondering about my accent, or I always say lack of accent, I was born in Basel, Switzerland. I grew up in sunny Joburg, South Africa. And for the past 9 or so years, I've been working in Vancouver, which is not as sunny as Joburg. I call it the city with the liquid sun. Just a few pictures to show you what I'm like when I'm not connected to the digital world. I love to explore the oceans. And again, some of my South African friends in the audience might recognize some of the places. I'm really fascinated by aviation, which I think most of us are in a way. It's just kind of the industry. And I also love to watch sunsets and sunrises wherever I am, which again is tough in Vancouver. But I live in Twassen-Ladner, so we have a bit more sun than you have downtown. So as I mentioned, I work on a thing called Visual Studio Team Services. It's our collaboration solution and allows any engineering team to plan, to develop, to test, release, monitor, and also learn from the solutions. And thanks to Satya, when he came to Microsoft, he actually told us, you will use the solution that you sell your customers, which was the end of all the internal tools that we engineers were writing. We can do it better than everybody else. So that was the end, and Visual Studio Team Services became the one engineering system. So we have another talk, I can point you to it if you're interested, how we moved 65,000 engineers to VSTS. It's actually, I always get corrected when I mention that back at the office. They say it's actually 75,000, and it's actually already clocked over 80,000. So it's quite a huge transformation story that we can share. But key is we use one engineering system. So the VSTS team uses VSTS to develop, build, and release. Our Windows team uses VSTS, the Azure team uses VSTS, Office uses VSTS. That's all thanks to Satya. We have started to standardize on one engineering system, which we actually also sell to the users, the likes of yourselves. So we always say, whether you're targeting the cloud, the hybrid cloud, or whatever, VSTS is our Azure DevOps solution. So that's the message we give internally for any language, any platform. So anybody who talks to me, I say, use VSTS. The tools is the easy part. Now, I inserted the slide last night. I just wanted to make sure. Yesterday, there was a lot of talk about canaries. Does everybody understand and know what a canary release is? Okay, not all hands went up. As a South African, there's a long history of mining. So in the old days, the miners used to take the canaries with them into the mines. And as long as the canary was happy, the miners were happy. So the canaries were really what we are today, the early adopters. We test the bits first. And if we're happy, the users will be happy. So that's the kind of analogy I just wanted to throw in. And I also just wanted to point back to Heidi's two talks, which are really relevant to what I'm about to talk about as well. So this is our definition of DevOps. There are so many other definitions, but this is the definition we use within Microsoft, and it's a union of people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to our customers or to our end users. If you like the definition, I've brought a whole stack of these stickers. They're over there at the pillar to decorate your laptops. So this is our definition. Again, if you disagree with it, I'd like to have a discussion with you. You will see that we do not mention any specific products. Because for us, looking back at the transition, which is more than 6-7 years now, the real problem was people, not product. Product is the easy part of any DevOps transition. So rings. I wanted to really talk about rings and flags. And it's not Lord of the Rings, it's deployment rings. So rings, it was, as first discussed in Jess Humble's book, makes it possible to progressively deploy binaries and have multiple releases in production. And I'm going to say in production quite a few times, so you're going to get tired of it. So I'll just put an example there is a developer is ready to commit a change, to check in something, to complete a pull request. Continuous integration should kick in. It should build, test, validate, and then trigger continuous delivery, which deploys to the canary ring. So that is the first ring we deploy to. So this is, again, what the miner holds in the hand. Back at the office, which is kind of just across the road, it includes every single engineer that works on VSTS. So we are the canaries of our own product. If we're happy that we can actually release it to early adopters, it gets deployed to the next ring, which in this case is early adopters, and so forth until it goes to all users. What you will see is on the background, you'll see that red shading. That is what we refer to as a blast radius. The further out you go in your rings, the more users will be affected. So again, you want to make sure that you catch any issue in the canary ring, not the other rings. And please jump in or just raise your hand. I think we've got enough time to answer ad hoc questions as well. And also, if you disagree, jump in. Yes?
How many canaries actually die?
How many?
Canaries.
I don't know about the canaries in the mining industry. The canaries on my side of the fence, basically daily. We kind of get affected daily, but which is good. Because we pick up bugs, we pick up issues, and we can fix them before it actually makes its way to your ring. So just the value in terms of deployment rings is you can gather feedback and test your hypothesis, and that's really to make sure that you're adding value with your feature to the user, because it's no use just deploying features. You can also decommission old releases and distribute new releases in production without affecting all users. So it's progressive deployment of your releases. Right, so we spoke about rings. Let's quickly look at flags. So what are flags? Feature flags were popularized by Martin Fowler quite a while ago, and they decoupled the release. So this is the thing we've just been deploying through all the rings, and feature exposure. I call it you take out a small screwdriver and you tweak the release. So you can enable features, you can disable features, or you can actually just tweak the environment, the release within a ring to suit a user, a few users, or all users. So feature flag, and Heidi can actually explain this much better than I can, but a feature flag is nothing than an on-off switch. So you have an on-off switch, and some of the feature flag solutions also have multi-values, like Launch Darkly have the multi-value feature, but I'm going to stick to true or false. So you have the switch, you have a feature flag management system, so that's where I see ops coming in. They define the feature flags, they define the values, true, false. Then you have a runtime query to figure out what the value is of the flag. And then it's nothing else but an if-else construct in your code. So if the flag is true, in this case, We will send an email. If it's false, we will print. So this is what the feature flag is about. And on the upside, I can toggle that feature flag, so I can switch from email to printing without having to redeploy the release. Or Heidi mentioned the kill switch yesterday. If I deploy a feature that is actually not doing what it should be doing, I can toggle the feature flag and disable it as quickly as possible. So what is the value of feature flags? Well, I can literally hide incomplete, regional, unreleased features in production. So instead of the old days where I had a very long-term branch and I was working on a feature, and then 1 year later I decided to merge it with the main master branch, and we all know what happens then, merge hell. I can have long-term feature branches, and I can deploy the feature if I think it's kind of ready to go with the release, and I can hide it behind a feature flag. So we can come back and tweak it. And I already mentioned that feature flags work for, you can see with the toggles there, I could actually literally configure the release for specific users in this room, select a group of users, or all of you. And I saw a hand.
How do you deal with interdependency of features? Like, one feature dependent on the other? How do you turn them off? Like, it's going to be a group of.
Yes, I'll repeat the question. I think your question is, if I have a feature that is dependent on another feature, and I toggle the one, how do I know what to do with the other? Is that correct? It's a good question and a tough problem to solve. And I'm looking at Launch Darkly to one day give us support on that. Today, with the Visual Studio Team Services team, every feature team is responsible for their features from the point of the idea to deployment. And it being, when I say deployment, it's also the maintenance that follows and taking the feature flags out again and communicating with other teams to make sure that those dependencies are picked up. Usually the canaries actually are the first to say something's wrong. So we don't have a solution for that today. It's a tough one to solve. So let's look closely at how we use rings and feature flags. And I'm going to mention two stories. One is obviously the Visual Studio Team Services product, which is our main product. And then I'm going to talk about the Visual Studio Team Services extensions, which is what the Rangers are working on. And literally extensions, I think the name is self-explanatory. We extend the product. I always say we fill gaps, which some people don't like to hear that because there are no gaps, but yes, there are gaps and we fill them. That's what the Rangers do. So for VSTS, which is our mainstream product, and again I put the yellow canary there so we always remember that the first ring is the canary. So even with Visual Studio Team Services, its first ring is the canary ring, and that includes all engineers on the VSTS team. It includes a selected few of early adopters, those that are really willing to share the pain. And the Rangers are in that ring as well. So we're going through, and I mentioned this, we're the first to experience the pain. If something goes wrong, if a feature flag gets toggled, which it shouldn't have been, we're the first to experience the pain, which I think is great. I want us to feel the pain, not you. You are not our testers at scale. That was mentioned yesterday as well, is let's just deploy and have our users test at scale. No, we should test at scale. And there's literally more than 1,000 engineers in the canary ring working their daily life, the engineering, the development, testing. They live and breathe in the canary ring, which is great. And then we do kind of what we do with normal testing, is we deploy to the other rings, and we start with the smallest data center. That's our next ring. Then we go to the biggest data center. Then we go to the international data centers with all their latency issues. And then the last ring is just everything that's left. So the remainder is in ring 6. So at the moment, with VSTS, we have 6 deployment rings, all running in production. So it's the same environment and the same release going to each of these rings. For VSTS, we ship features every 3 weeks. So we have 3-week sprints, and every 3 weeks we ship a new release to the cloud. And sometimes we also have multiple bug fixes per day. So we use feature flags quite heavily to manage our 3-week cadence. And we use them to, as again mentioned, is to expose features or to hide incomplete features or to hide regional features. Like some features are not permitted in some regions. We can hide them with feature flags. But we really use it to hide features, to enable features, and to test, like the A/B testing, to test if a feature is really valuable or if people prefer the old way of doing things. So very often you'll see 2 options, which is where A/B testing comes in, is where we try something out and we test a hypothesis again. And you'll see on the right-hand side, I just took an extract. We actually used a custom solution for VSTS. Why? We discussed that this morning, is we started our journey in 2010. At that time, there was no launch darkly, I think. Otherwise, we would probably have considered it. So we built our own custom solution for feature flags, and it's been in there for years, so it's going to be very difficult to just pull it out. So we use a custom solution as part of VSTS. The Rangers, so this is now the part-time community of engineers from Microsoft and also outside of Microsoft. We work together. It's a real great, cool community. If you would like to know more about it, talk to me afterwards. We also use the ring deployment model for our extensions, and we have 3 rings. So remember VSTS, we have 6, because we have a much bigger deployment or much bigger user base. For the Rangers, we use 3 rings, and the first ring, again, is a canary ring. So this is where all the active Rangers are sitting. So again, we test our own stuff. When we're happy is we deploy to what we call the early adopters ring, and those include people like yourselves who, again, wish to share the pain or try out new features. It's really get a preview of what's coming. That's what these feature flags are great for as well, or the rings in this case. And then the third one is the users ring. So once we're happy, we deploy to the users ring, and that's literally from the hundreds of thousands of users and more.
What's your approximate time period between each of these rings?
Okay, I wish you would have asked me on the previous slide, because there it's much quicker. And I'll explain why. With Visual Studio Team Services, we have the 3-week cadence, and we usually start to deploy to ring 0, which is a canary ring, on a Friday. We're already working with all the features, but we have to test the release again. So we literally deploy to ring 0 again, and we let that mellow for the weekend, just to make sure. And then it's basically we push out every day, go to another ring. So we literally do the whole world in 1 week. With the Rangers, it takes a lot. It can be much quicker, it can be, but it usually takes a long time to actually get to the users ring, because it's a part-time community. It's engineers doing this in their family time. So when we say we have an issue, with VSTS, it's usually fixed within an hour. With the Rangers, it can literally run into days. So for the Rangers, I can't give you a rough estimate. Like this morning, I did send off a message to the whole team of an extension, asking them to approve the release. So now I have to wait until they wake up in the various time zones and approve the release. I just put up a dashboard. So this is the Rangers dashboard, and I just, in the dotted line there, I just wanted to show you one of the examples. So VSTS extensions can be extensions to anything that's in VSTS, and typically it's in the CI/CD pipeline, or in this case, it's on the dashboard widgets. So in the center, you'll see a widget that rolls up the Kanban board. Top left is another widget which we wrote, which I can actually see without really reading the details, that we have all our builds are okay, but we have one release below it. I can see that one release is failing, so we should probably look into that. So again, it's just to extend the the standard product, and in this case, you were saying to the product team, it's very difficult for me to see at a glance which are all our builds okay, are all our releases okay, and at that time we didn't have the feature. Top right, if you use VSTS, go to your profile and you will see preview features. So this is where you can actually toggle your feature flags yourself to enable features for preview. Right, and with the ranges, I mentioned Launch Darkly came into the picture. We explored the custom solution that we're using for VSTS, and we said it's too complex for us to use as a community. We looked at open source solutions, and then we looked at service-based solutions, and we decided to go for Launch Darkly because, number one, we felt it's comprehensive, it was simple to use, and they're very friendly to the community, the open source community. So we said, fine, let's use Launch Darkly, and we've never actually looked back. We've also consolidated or abstracted all the logic that we use to talk to Launch Darkly in Azure Functions, and that is to keep the logic in the actual extensions very simple. So we just wanted to abstract that. And if you're interested, you can go to GitHub and find all our projects. Like the roll-up extension is the one that's using feature flags, and the Azure Functions are on GitHub as well. You're welcome to fork. I would love if you would contribute as well, or just use it as a reference. Then a quick comparison, and this is now from the Rangers view. People always ask me, what's the difference between... Yes, I'll get you in a second. What's the difference between rings and feature flags? So this is a quick comparison. For us, we can use either for progressive exposure. You could see that we could actually expose a release progressively using rings, and we can tweak features in a release using feature flags. The primary cost for rings is your infrastructure and the maintenance thereof. For feature flags, it's technical debt, and I'll get to that in a second. Primary use for releases, it's really to control that blast radius, i.e. how many users am I going to affect when I release this release? And then with features, it's fine-tuning the release. The last one, blast radius for a release is, well, it's all the users in that ring. And if you don't use rings, it's all your users. So just think about that, let it sink in, and would you like to affect a few users or all of your users with a bug like the one that Heidi mentioned yesterday that took a whole company down? Probably not. Blast radius for feature flags is either no users, specific users, or all users. You can really fine-tune it. And now, sorry, your question.
Yeah, related to this first discussion as well, you mentioned before that you have the previous features as an optional setting for each user of the TSFS in the previous one or two previous slides. Yeah, the top one. That one, sorry.
This one.
Yeah, so what if I am a user and I don't select that optional feature flag, and that feature flag is actually not used by the majority of users? How is your criteria to say, okay, this feature is mature enough, we should just move forward in the pipeline?
Yeah, there are some features which we actually... sorry. No, I need to roll back with my answer. And so I think what you're asking is if you don't select that feature in the preview feature, or the users don't select it or discover it, per se, how do we know if it's a good feature or not? Right, so we actually deploy a lot of features without using preview features. So we actually roll out a lot of features as part of the releases, and we do A/B testing without you knowing. And we gather about 2 petabytes of telemetry per day for VSTS. I think that's a lot of zeros. And that's what the likes of myself, the PMs, do most of the day, is actually looking at that telemetry and determining whether features are good or bad. So we release a lot of features without you knowing. Those are the big features where we want to know, is this a good thing or a bad thing? And we actually tell our user base, we are working on feature X and feature X plus 1. So the users will typically, the early adopters, they check this every day. I check it every day as well because it's quite interesting to see what is actually happening in ring 0. And you can tweak it, or you can select a feature flag for yourself or for your whole account. So if you're an admin of a VSTS account, you can say, I would like to turn this feature on for all my users, if you want to make sure that everybody uses that feature. Did that answer your question? Okay, so we have 5 minutes for questions, which we started questions. I'm going to steal a few seconds in my last slide because I wanted to say caution. Because you should all be excited about using ring deployments, feature flags. Everybody should kind of say, I want to try this out, and I can't wait to get home and fire up my laptop. I just want to say caution, because progressive exposure comes at a cost. Feature flags, remember, it's a true-false. It's an if-else construct, which means you've just doubled your test path. You have to test for both true and false. You have to remember that these feature flags get stale over time. So when a feature is actually solid and you switch it to true, you should really remove that if-else construct and take the else part out. Now, who in this room is comfortable to go into a production system and remove code? Yeah, I see a few courageous hands coming up. This is one of the challenges that we live with, is making sure that the feature teams actually remove their technical debt. And we literally have hundreds of stale feature flags in the product, which is not bad because we're not breaking anything, but it is technical debt. So be careful on that. And then also make sure you understand the implications on flipping a feature flag. I mean, Heidi had a good story. We have 2 other stories. We had Brian Harry on stage. He's our corporate vice president, or used to be. He was on stage on a big marketing event, and he said, well, flip the switch because we tested it. Well, it didn't go well. Well, the flip went well. Everybody in the event started using the feature. Everybody was getting excited, and then suddenly there were authentication issues, and our back-end systems went down. The other scenario, and you can read this in blog posts, we're very transparent. You should see that the new Microsoft, we are very transparent. So if something goes wrong, we will tell you that something is wrong. And if you go to our support blogs, you will see that we actually also tell you what went wrong and how we mitigated it. So the other scenario is when we first actually enabled feature flags in the Ranges extension, everything went well. And then it headed south again because users started saying, I'm getting these 503 errors. Azure Functions, the kind of subscription we used, was limited at 300. We picked up the rollup widget as our primary test candidate, which is used by, 10, 20,000 users out there and refreshes every 15 seconds. So again, we had a meltdown on our backends. We did not anticipate the impact of flipping the switch. And I'll just, kind of my closing note here is, this is common theme in DevOps, it's a journey of continuously learning and improving. We are making mistakes daily, but we are learning from our mistakes daily, and we are improving daily. But the DevOps transition, whether you use feature flags, rings, or whatever else, is a destination you'll never really reach. Because by the time you get there, there's something more to improve. And then just a few references and any questions, because I can see the timer is ticking down.
I noticed in your earlier slide where you had your deployment dashboard, you had some lines where there were green boxes in later rings, but gray boxes in earlier rings, which sort of looked to me like some of those rings have been skipped. I was wondering if you could explain that.
Please repeat.
In the one, I think it was a dashboard for the VSTS deployment rings, when we saw a few reds and a few greens.
Well, that then there were some grays.
And a few grays. The grays means they were basically not action for that ring. And the screenshot I actually took was from incidents where we do hot fixes. So I would have to go back to that screen to answer your question, and I'll do that right after the session. But I would suspect that we actually applied a hot fix in an outer ring, which was holding up one of our top customers, probably, and we did not do it in the previous rings. But thanks to our branching model, which we use, which is very flat, is the next time a release goes out, it would actually that fix would start going out in ring 0. But I'll have a look at the screenshot again, and I'll get back to you, Eric. Yes. Any other question?
How fast can you flip a flag? Like if someone calls you and says there's an issue, how fast is it to return that feature?
I have to click a bookmark, which takes me to launch darkly, and flip the switch. It's a toggle. And then it's a matter of the widget refreshing. So there is latency involved because there's obviously a ping that needs to come from your service out there to say what is the value. But with our dashboards, that happens every 15 seconds. So it depends on the solution out there.
So in terms of for non-authenticated users, if you turn on a switch, and especially in terms of an A/B test, like some users would get an A test versus B test. How do you make sure that when they return to your site, they are getting consistent experience? One of the things is like setting a cookie for the browser, but if you turn off the switch, can you keep the experience consistent for the user?
So if I understand your question correctly, is you actually go to the preview features and you say you want to look at feature B, not A. And when you come back, are you still looking at feature B? Is that your question? We don't use cookies. Basically, the client pings the feature flag service to say what is the value for this flag for you? Because I can see that you have actually toggled the feature flag on a personal level, not a group or ring or kind of the grand level. So we keep track of that you have actually flipped that switch. So when the query comes through, we know you flipped the switch and this is the value you selected, and you're back to B. Great, and time's up. Please catch me in the hallways if you have any other questions. Otherwise, thank you very much.